All right, so today we're diving into something pretty cool,
Yeah,
learning a new language.
it's a popular one.
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of our listeners probably
Yeah.
have this on their to-do list or
Yeah.
or maybe even actively working on it,
Absolutely.
whether it's for travel or connecting with family
Mm.
or maybe just to kind of boost your career.
It's a great goal to have.
It's a really cool goal.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down some of the best ways to learn a new language.
Okay.
And we've got three sources this time around.
Right?
We have a student article from Yale's The Ledger.
Okay.
We have a deep dive blog post
Mm-hmm.
from language learning pra Scott H. Young,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
and a YouTube video from a channel called Easy, actually.
That sounds promising.
It's actually way smarter than you'd think.
Interesting.
So,
So
We-
you got a good mix of perspectives then.
yeah, definitely. And they all kind of tackle these big questions in different ways, like
Okay,
what's
yeah.
the easiest way to learn a language?
Mhm.
What's the best way? And then, of course, the one that everybody wants to know.
How long does it take?
How long does it
That's-
actually take?
Yeah, that's the big one.
So, to get started, the Easy Action video is really interesting because it
Okay.
starts off kind of hilarious,
Right?
talking about falling into the language learning rabbit hole,
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
where you end up spending hours watching videos about how to learn a language.
Instead of actually learning.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of actually learning.
I've definitely been there.
Oh, I think we all have at some point.
Absolutely.
But, it actually highlights a really key point that they make in the video, too,
Which is
which is that motivation is so important.
that makes sense.
Like, you need to have more than just a
Mm.
kind of passing interest.
You've got to have a reason that really sticks.
Yeah, you've got to have that deeper reason for wanting to learn the language.
Absolutely.
Now, both the Yale article and the blog post really emphasize immersion.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, they both talk about how it's the most effective way to learn a language.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, it's kind of how we all learned our first language.
Yeah, you're just surrounded by it, right?
You're just surrounded by it. You're picking it up naturally.
Not memorizing grammar rules as a baby.
No, you're not cracking open a textbook when you're 2 years old.
Exactly.
So immersion is kind of about recreating that environment.
Okay, so it's not just about textbooks and flashcards.
It's about making the language a part of your life.
I like that.
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
Well, the Yale article brings up another interesting point, which is that AI is becoming a game changer in language learning.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about that.
Yeah, they talk about things like personalized lessons and instant feedback.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
So it's like having a personal language coach in your pocket.
Almost. Yeah,
Yes.
it can really tailor the learning process to your pace and your needs.
Which makes it more effective, I'm guessing.
And honestly, more fun.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got immersion and we've got AI.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else these sources are highlighting?
Yeah, so another thing that both the Yale article and Scott H. Young's blog post really emphasize
Okay.
is consistency.
Consistency.
They both say that short,
Right.
regular practice
Mm-hmm.
is way more effective than those crazy cram sessions.
Oh, so it's not about intensity. It's about showing up regularly,
Exactly.
like building a muscle.
Yeah, like you wouldn't expect to get ripped by working out once a month.
Right.
So the same goes for language learning.
Makes sense.
You need to be consistent to really make those connections in your brain and build fluency over time.
So we're building those neural pathways.
Exactly.
I like it.
Now, Scott's blog post really goes deep into different learning methods.
Okay.
He talks about things like accuracy first,
Mm-hmm.
input is all you need,
Okay.
talking is everything.
Interesting.
It's kind of overwhelming.
So many options.
Yeah. But the good news is he doesn't say that there's one right way. He actually argues that the best way to learn a language is the way that clicks with your learning style and your goals,
That makes sense.
and even your personality.
So it's about finding your perfect fit. So I
Exactly.
think people might be really visual learners, so
Mhm.
maybe flashcards work for them, but someone else might need to hear the language spoken aloud
Right.
to really get it.
And even the Easy Actually video had some interesting ideas for speaking practice.
Like what?
Like they talk about shadowing YouTube
So
videos.
shadowing, so like,
Yeah, like repeating what they're saying.
oh, okay.
It might feel a little silly at first,
Okay, I can imagine.
but it helps you get comfortable with the sounds and the rhythms of the language.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and Scott actually talks about something called the No English Challenge in his blog post.
The little English challenge.
Yeah, where you basically create this immersion bubble in your daily life.
Oh, so you designate certain times or activities where you only use the new language.
Exactly.
That's a cool idea.
It is.
I like it.
It's a way to force yourself to think in that language, even if you're not
Right.
physically immersed in a different country.
Even if you can't travel.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've touched on some of these different methods, but I'm really curious to hear more about them,
Yeah, me too.
especially the ones Scott outlines.
Yeah, he had quite a few.
We talked about accuracy first, which sounds pretty traditional,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the others?
Well, let's dive into those next.
So one of the methods Scott talks about is input is all you need.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So it's basically the idea that you should surround yourself with the language as much as possible.
Okay.
So that means like reading, listening, watching,
So it's about absorbing the language through different kinds of media.
exactly.
Okay.
And the idea is that by being exposed to the language constantly,
Mm-hmm.
your brain will kind of naturally start to pick up the patterns.
Okay, so instead of focusing on grammar rules and stuff like that, you're just letting your brain kind of figure it out.
Exactly like how we learn our first language.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Scott argues that this approach can be really effective for building comprehension,
Okay.
especially if you enjoy things like books or movies,
Yeah, I can see how that would work.
Mm,
But I guess the downside is you might not get as much speaking practice.
that's a good point. Yeah, it's more about absorbing the language
Right.
than actually producing it,
Okay.
which brings us to the talking is everything method.
Okay, so this is the opposite end of the spectrum.
Pretty much.
So what does that look like?
So this is all about jumping into conversations.
Okay.
Even if you're not perfect, even if you make mistakes.
So it's about prioritizing fluency over accuracy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think language partners, conversation classes, even just chatting with native speakers online.
Mm-hmm.
The focus is on getting comfortable with actually using the language.
I can see how that would be really helpful.
Yeah, because if you're always worried about making mistakes,
Right.
you'll never actually speak.
You'll be too scared to open your mouth.
Exactly. So this method is all about like building that confidence
Right.
and fluency from the get-go.
So we've got these different approaches, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get too deep into the methods, I want to talk about the big question,
Okay.
the one that everyone wants to know.
How long does it actually take?
How long does it actually take to learn a new language?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and I'm guessing there's no easy answer.
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
But the Easy Actually video did have this chart ranking languages by difficulty
Okay.
for English speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that Spanish, French, and Portuguese are among the easiest.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
It makes sense. They share a lot of roots with English.
Right.
But even with those languages,
Yeah.
reaching fluency can take a wildly different amount of time.
Okay, so what are some of the factors that affect that?
Well, your learning style is a big one.
Okay.
Some people thrive in structured classes.
Mm-hmm.
Others learn better on their own.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a learn by doing kind of person.
Right, so maybe immersion would be a good fit for you.
Maybe.
Your previous language experience also plays a role.
Okay.
Like if you've already learned a second language,
Mhm.
your brain might be kind of wired for it.
So it's like learning a musical instrument.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you know one, picking up another is a bit easier.
Exactly.
Cool.
And of course, your motivation plays a huge role.
Right, like if you're just learning for fun,
Mm,
you might not stick with it as long as someone who needs the language for their career
exactly.
or to connect with family or something.
Absolutely.
Okay, so motivation is key.
Huge. What else?
We can't forget about your learning environment.
Okay.
Do you have access to native speakers for practice?
Right.
Are you immersed in the language through media or cultural events?
Yeah, all those things can make a difference.
Absolutely. They can all speed up the process,
So it sounds like it's not just about how many hours you put in.
but also the quality of those hours.
Exactly.
Right.
And then, of course, the complexity of the language itself matters too.
Right. Some languages are just harder to learn than others.
Exactly. Some have more intricate grammar or tonal systems.
Like Mandarin with its 4 tones.
Exactly. That can be a real challenge.
It can be. Yeah.
And even within the same language, fluency means different things to different people.
Right.
Are you aiming for basic conversation,
Mm-hmm.
reading novels, giving presentations?
So your goals will determine how long it takes.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe the question isn't how long does it take,
Right.
but how fluent do I want to become?
Exactly. That's a much more helpful starting point.
Okay.
But the Easy Actually video did give some rough time frames,
Okay.
at least for those easier languages.
Like Spanish, French, and Portuguese.
Exactly. They estimated around 480 to 720 hours
To reach proficiency.
to reach proficiency, yeah.
That honestly doesn't sound as intimidating as I thought.
Right.
I was thinking it would be like years and years.
It's encouraging, right?
It is.
But remember, those are just estimates.
Of course, your mileage may vary,
Exactly.
but it's still helpful to have a ballpark idea.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And while they didn't give numbers for harder languages,
Right.
it's safe to say they'd take longer.
Yeah.
Think about Japanese, with its writing system and cultural nuances.
Right.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, so that brings us back to finding the method that's right for you.
Exactly.
We touched on the traditional accuracy-first approach,
Mm-hmm.
but Scott has a lot more to say about that. So accuracy first, it's kind of like that classic approach, you know?
Yeah, the one we probably all learned in school.
Lots of drills, memorization.
BAM rules.
Yeah, getting those grammar rules down pat.
But Scott points out
Right.
that it might not be the fastest route to fluency.
Right, because you can know all the
I've
rules.
seen actually use the language.
Yeah, you can ace a grammar test
Exactly.
and not be able to hold a conversation.
It's like learning all the basketball rules, but never actually playing a game. Oh, I like that analogy.
You might have all the knowledge,
Yeah.
but you don't have the skills.
You need to put it into practice.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Input is great for understanding,
Mm-hmm.
but to really speak and write confidently,
Yeah.
you need to actively practice.
So what's the best way to do that?
Well, Scott actually talks about combining different methods
Okay.
for the best results.
So like a mixed approach.
Exactly. Like maybe you start with some grammar basics
Okay.
just to get a foundation,
Okay.
and then you focus on immersion through movies and music,
Mm-hmm.
and then you find a language partner to practice speaking with.
So you kind of get the best of all worlds.
Exactly. You tailor the approach to your own needs and goals.
I like that.
And he also brought up this really interesting idea called learning a language on the side.
Learning a language on the side, what does that even mean?
So it's about integrating language learning into other things you're already doing,
Okay.
especially academic pursuits.
So like instead of just studying a language on its own,
You're kind of weaving it into other subjects.
exactly, like imagine taking a history class,
Mhm.
but all the lectures and readings are in your target language.
Whoa, so you're learning history and the language at the same time.
Exactly, you're learning through the language.
That's intense.
It is, Scott actually highlighted French immersion programs in Canada
Oh, yes.
as a really successful example.
So these kids are like learning everything in French.
Yes, starting from kindergarten,
Wow, so they're learning math and science and history?
all in French.
That's amazing.
It's a testament to the power of this integrated approach.
Yeah,
But Scott does acknowledge it's not easy.
I can imagine.
It takes serious dedication.
Yeah, to switch your whole academic life to another language.
It would be tough, especially at first.
I bet the rewards are huge.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine graduating high school,
Yeah.
fluent in another language.
And with all those other subjects mastered as well.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've busted the myth of the one best way to learn a language.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the power of AI and immersion,
Yeah.
and we even explored this whole integrated learning thing.
It's been a wild ride.
It has.
Yeah.
But remember, this is just the beginning.
Absolutely.
There are so many resources and communities out there.
To support you on your language learning journey.
Yeah, the key takeaway is to find what works best for you.
Exactly.
Your learning style, your goals, your motivations, they're all your guide.
And don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah, try different things, see what sticks.
Exactly.
So to all our listeners out there who are dreaming of speaking a new language,
Mm-hmm.
I have a challenge for you.
Okay, I like challenges.
What's one small step you could take today to get started?
Yeah.
Download an app.
Find a language partner online.
Watch a video in your target language.
Anything, just take that first step.
Every step, no matter how small, gets you closer to your goal.
Absolutely.
So keep learning, keep practicing, and who knows?
Maybe someday we'll be hearing about your language learning success story.
I love that.
Until then, happy learning, everyone.